Hello everybody. Welcome to week 5 of our course on the history of artificial intelligence. So this week we are going to start looking at AI in a little bit of a new way. By this point in our story, AI is no longer simply something that's associated with laboratories or chess programs or imagined intelligent machines like we've looked at it over the past few weeks. It has become part of the systems that shape how people communicate, travel, shop, search, work, and even how we ourselves can be evaluated in everyday life. Now, we touched on this a little bit last week, but we're going to focus on it specifically this week in our class. And so in many ways, this week is the week when AI stops feeling distant and starts feeling as ordinary as our phone sitting next to us. AI has been with us for some time now, and also in more ways than we might even be aware on a daily basis. Now, I remember back in the 1990s when I was in graduate school, my history of technology professor, Dr. Carol Purcell, used to say that the most revolutionary moment in the story of Edison's light bulb was not when he actually invented it in the lab. The real revolution came when electricity and artificial light became so embedded into society that it became actually, ironically, invisible. So what did he mean by invisibility of electric light? Well, he meant that when we walk into a room today, we do not ever pause and ask, I wonder if there's going to be electric light in this room, because the sun's going to set soon. We simply expect to have electric light when we walk into a room of our house or a business. And we really only notice the absence of electric light when it is out during a major power outage. And so I think this idea gives us a powerful way to think about AI systems this week. One of the most important moments in AI, and you can argue perhaps it's the most revolutionary, is not when it was created, but when it became so ordinary, when AI became so built into the systems around us that people stopped noticing that it was there. So that's the central theme of this week, and it reflects specifically on our title, AI enters the world in the first 2 decades of the 21st century. So, again, AI becomes historically significant and revolutionary, not only when it grows more powerful, but also when it becomes more routine, embedded, expected in our lives, and easy to overlook. So today, obviously, we have AI in our phones. We have AI voice assistants. We have AI recommendation systems on YouTube. We have search engines with AI built in. We have classroom tools with AI at our disposal. We have surveillance tools for law enforcement. We have predictive systems, and we have decision-making processes that many people now consider and encounter every day without really ever thinking that AI is at the heart of what these systems tell us to do. And once AI becomes part of ordinary life, which it already has, the major questions about AI begin to change. The issue is no longer, well, what can AI potentially do? We can see what AI is capable of doing now, but we also have to ask questions like, who does the AI serve? Who watches over the AI? Who does the AI advantage? Who does the AI misjudge? And what kinds of power are hidden inside these AI systems that seem so familiar and convenient to all of us? So our core materials this week help us to explore this shift from several different angles. We begin with the first part of a frontline video called In the Age of AI, and this is a documentary that shows how by the 2010s AI had become a force in shaping public life, major institutions, and global competition. It uses the AlphaGo match, and Go is another training ground. It's an ancient game. It's a training ground for proving AI techniques. It uses the AlphaGo match as a dramatic symbol of AI's rising power. But then this front line expands the story. It takes us into transportation, medicine, national strategy, also looks at public policy. And what matters here is not that AI becomes more impressive, it is that societies began to organize themselves around these AI systems. Next in the core materials we have Gray and Suri's work entitled Ghost Work. This reminds us that many automated systems really are not as automated as they might appear. Behind this sort of smooth, impenetrable surface of AI, there are often hidden human workers labeling data, moderating content, checking accuracy, and stepping in when and if the system fails. Now, this reading from Gray and Suri is important because it challenges the simple idea that AI replaces people. In many cases, it doesn't simply replace people, it actually reorganizes labor and makes that human labor harder to see. Then we look at Helen Nissenbaum's article, at least portions of it, entitled Privacy as Contextual Integrity. This gives us a powerful framework for thinking about privacy in a world shaped by data-driven systems that is constantly observing us in every action that we take. Now, she argues that privacy is not just about keeping our information secret. It's about whether information moves appropriately about us within a particular social context. And this matters a great deal once digital systems start collecting, sharing, and analyzing information across different parts of our lives. So her work helps explain why AI can feel invasive, not simply because it knows things about us, but because it moves information across boundaries in ways that violate our expectations or even our knowledge of how that information about us is moving from place to place in the AI infrastructure. Finally, in the core materials this week, Julia Angwin's Machine Bias takes us into criminal justice and something called algorithmic justice. So this reading shows how systems that are presented as objective and neutral can still reproduce social inequality. So her article raises a deeply important question for ourselves this week. When machine systems are used to judge people, are they eliminating bias, or are they just hiding behind a new type of algorithmic justice and bias behind its AI technical language and numbers? So these core materials show that once AI entered everyday life, it became more than a research project. It became infrastructure. It became as invisible and as needed as the electric light that surrounds us today. And it raises deeply important questions. When it becomes infrastructure, when it becomes part of how society works, this means that the history of AI now overlaps in many parts of our societal experience. It overlaps with the history of labor. It overlaps with our privacy. It overlaps with our surveillance systems. It also overlaps and maybe contributes to, in some ways, inequality and also the power distribution within society. Now, our learning paths this week, again, we'll have 3 for you to choose from. They give you different ways to explore this general idea in a broader perspective. Learning path A is entitled Always On Assistance. And in it, you get to look to see what happens when AI becomes conversational, personal, and constantly available to us. You're going to look at the Stanford Code X piece, which is when Apple acquired Siri, the voice assistant, of course, and this helps place the voice assistants like Siri in historical context by showing how this Stanford Code X research project became a commercial product embedded in everybody who carries around Apple phones. I carry around a Google Pixel and embedded in the Android universe. Next in Learning Path A, we have the Verge review of the iPhone 4S, and this captures the real excitement surrounding Siri's debut and the sense that something new was entering our lives with this always-on assistant. The next part of this path is Jennifer Allen's retrospective, which helps us look back on Siri with a little bit more distance, showing both its early promise and also what limitations Siri had immediately upon its release. So these Learning Path A readings suggest that voice assistants matter historically, not because they work perfectly, but because they normalize the idea of AI as part of our ordinary routine, as always as close to us as our phone. We have an optional film this week for you to consider, and we're going to be looking at this film again next week as well. But the film is called Her, and it pushes this idea of the always-on assistant even further by imagining what happens when an assistant begins to feel less like a tool and more like an emotional companion. So then the other option for you is Learning Path B. That's entitled The Surveillance Society, and the focus shifts here from personal assistance to observation, AI observation of society itself. This is the question of what happens when AI helps to monitor, sort, and shape human behavior. You have a Smithsonian piece, again, touching on popular culture, which is going to be the central theme next week. But the Smithsonian piece on Person of Interest, the television show, shows how popular culture captured growing anxieties about surveillance and data systems. We have another crash course video on how YouTube knows what you should watch when you open it up, and explains how platforms learn from user behavior and shape what people see next. We're going to see Helen Nissenbaum again in this Learning Path B. She was from our core readings, but this time this is a conference presentation, a video that of her speaking, which helps you to think about privacy issues and AI. The next in this Learning Path B is Tarleton Gillespie's The Relevance of Algorithms, and this shows that algorithms do not simply organize information neutrally. These AI algorithms help to decide what becomes visible, what counts as relevant, and how people experience the online world. So Learning Path B shows that AI is not just something that we use. It's also something that increasingly structures the experience around us. The final learning path this week, Learning Path C, is entitled Machines Decide. And here you explore machine judgment more directly. Here we begin with Jeff Larson reporting on something called a COMPAS algorithm, C-O-M-P-A-S. And this shows how predictive systems can influence major decisions while still producing unequal outcomes. So it's a powerful example of how these algorithmic systems can appear objective even when their consequences are highly contested. Next, we have an account by Sebastian Thrun of something called Stanley. Stanley was an autonomous vehicle that won the DARPA Grand Challenge, and this offers a very different situation, a different case, one in which machine decision making appears oppressive and effective in a controlled environment. Then we have a PBS video on predictive algorithms, and that helps connect all these issues to broader public concerns about trust, fairness, and accountability. We have another optional popular culture experience this week. That is Minority Report and Black Mirror's episode called Nosedive. And these extend these AI themes into popular culture, asking what happens when predictive systems and social scoring becomes so normalized that people are forced to live inside these AI realities. Okay, so that concludes our overview of the learning materials this week. The next step for the week is our discussion question. And this asks you to reflect on what changed in our lives once AI entered it. Did AI become more useful? Did AI become more powerful, more invisible, more unequal, or all of these at once? Has our life improved? Are there ways in which our life has been compromised by AI? These are the central questions that sit at the center of our week. Now, earlier in the course, we have focused on defining intelligence, artificial intelligence, and asking whether or not machines could imitate thought or reason. Now the question is simply different. What happens when AI becomes part of the background systems through which people live everyday lives? We have no doubt that AI is often reasonable, often so reasonable that it's hard to distinguish AI from a human. So we're going to think about all these things this week, and to help you do that, we are going to have a hands-on activity with 3 different pathways that you can choose. So again, keep in mind the theme this week is AI enters the world, and therefore the hands-on AI activity is going to be something that you actually already likely have. However, our discussion will enable us to really focus on it and take it out of the realm of invisibility and try to expose it and see it for what it is in our lives. So the first option, you can just use your nearest voice assistant. It might be Amazon's Alexa or Siri or Google Gemini, whatever the voice assistant you have on hand, and reflect directly on what it feels like to have an always-on available AI presence in your life. What are the positives and what are the negatives of this assistant? We'll discuss that in the classroom. In option B, you will examine a recommendation system that you already use. It could be YouTube when you turn it on, or Netflix, or any other AI system that recommends things for you to do and watch, enjoy, and learn. And when we think about this in the classroom, we'll share about what it reveals about personalization, surveillance, and the shaping of our attention. In the third option for this hands-on activity this week, you will identify an everyday system of machine judgment, such as spam filters, predictive text, navigation apps, fraud alerts, credit scoring, and reflect on how one of those is useful, whether or not it's fair, whether or not it complicates life sometimes, how it makes life easier, and also some of the concerns that it might introduce into the nature of humanity. So in the discussion post, we'll answer the main question and then identify which pathway you chose, describe what you observed, and try to connect these experiences to our readings or videos this week. So the goal is not technical mastery of any of these hands-on activities in AI that you're doing this week. The goal is awareness. I want us to be more aware of the AI that we're using. I want us to metaphorically walk into a room and check out the light, see where the light is, see where the light switches are, and turn that revolutionary technology into something visible that we can analyze today, this week in class. So the key takeaways from this week, the key takeaway is that AI changes society most deeply, not only when it becomes more intelligent, but when it becomes ordinary. Once AI entered everyday life, it brought real benefits. It made systems faster, more convenient, more personalized, and in many cases more useful. But it also brought some consequences of hidden labor, new forms of surveillance, persistent bias, and systems of judgment that can feel powerful, and these systems are not always transparent or accountable. So the history of AI is not only the history of the inventors, not only the history of the famous breakthroughs or the pioneers or the technical milestones. It's also the history of these invisible systems that become part of our lifeblood of what it means to be human. So as you move through this week's material, I encourage you to keep asking yourself one simple question. Where is AI already present in my life? What is it doing there? And does it always benefit me? And once we begin asking that question seriously, AI no longer looks like a future. It becomes part of the world in which we are already living. So I look forward to seeing you in discussion this week, and we'll discuss more about AI in everyday life.